Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast. Today we are talking onboarding new leadership team members. Is your camp experiencing some new turnover? Are you have experienced leaders taking on more supervisory responsibilities? Well, we have Ryan Rosen from Camp Kinneret in California to talk all things onboarding. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We're going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Hello, friends. I'm Howie Grossinger, the co-owner and director of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto.
Hello, everyone. I am Kelly Shuna, Executive Director and co-owner of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp, located in Stillwater, Minnesota. If you are looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think, wow, this is the best podcast ever, and think it'd be great for other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen.
Best podcast ever. Yes. Hi, Kelly. Great to see you. I'm kind of feeling a little nervous about this shout out for our camp sponsor right now. So I'm going to do my best. Our friends will find out why in just a moment. But we are very lucky to have Camptivities as one of our show sponsors this year. If you're interested in a better solution for scheduling camp activities, please check out Camptivities. So imagine yourself, doing a Google search for camp activity scheduler, and you come across Camptivities. It's actually an activity scheduler for camps by camp people. Are you interested in manual adjustments, rainy day scheduling, tons of customizable settings? And maybe, I'm happy to say more than 50 plus reports to work with. You have found your software. I'm a proud Camptivities user. Our team loves it, and we highly recommend that you check out Camptivities. Let Camptivities help you get away from your desk and back out into camp. The team at Camptivities would love to show you what we all feel is the next big thing in camp. Sorry about that. Visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat. You'll notice why I'm so nervous, because our guest is pretty much a VIP in the world of the Camp Owners Podcast sponsorship. Today's topic is proof, ladies and gentlemen, that current camp employment trends are impacting us just like other industries out there. We've heard lots of talk regarding the turnover in leadership team members at recent camp conferences and camp owner gatherings. As we prepare for summer and staff training, we'd like to discuss the onboarding of new leadership team members and how we prepare them for this new role at camp. Our guest today is Ryan Rosen, the owner and director of Camp Kinneret, a summer day camp located in Agoura Hills, California. Ryan is also the owner of Camptivities and our sponsor. And we are so thrilled to have not only Ryan as a guest on this show, but his support of this program. And once again, check out Camptivities. And hey, we may even throw in a bit of a conversation about that over the course of our time together. Who knows? We'll see where this goes, Kelly. Great to see you, Ryan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me today. I'm excited to be a part of it all.
Amazing, amazing. You know, one of the things that we do at the start of every show is to get our guest to talk a little bit about their camp origin story. You know, we've often used this in the context of Marvel Universe. Like, what is your origin story as a superhero? But yeah, so please share with us, Ryan, how the camp journey began for you.
So going way, way back to my very first camp experience was watching my sister leave on the bus to go to camp. And I told my parents I wanted to go. And so they signed me up and I went and literally got to camp and started crying nonstop because I only thought about the bus ride. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't care about camp itself. But that was a long time ago. I grew up going to camps after that and did that for a long time, sleepaway as well as day camp as well. My family moved said, hey, you got to find something to do this summer. Started working at Camp Canaret in Agora Hills. Loved it. Didn't do a great job my first year, actually. Really was there for me and not for what I was helping others create and for their experiences. Came back a second year. Thankfully, they gave me another opportunity and really enjoyed it quite a bit. Was paired with a counselor who really didn't quite get what was going on, so it gave me a lot of opportunity to grow, and went on to become a lifeguard and pool director for 4 summers, assistant director for 3 more summers, graduated and left and went into the quote real world. Did that for a year, but wasn't really feeling fulfilled, even though we're working on incredible projects around the world. And had a conversation with the former owner of Canaret and said, hey, is there anything I can do? Any suggestions? Ultimately, that led to me coming back as a co-director, and then in 2010, having a conversation that led to them selling us the program in 2011. And so my wife and I purchased Camp Canaret in 2011, and now this is what we do. And Camptivities happened because the person who had been doing scheduling at Canaret for all those years was no longer able to do it in the first year of me owning camp. And I went to my good friend Cam and said, can you help me with this? And he said, we could write something that will work for you. And so that's where Camptivity started, was what are the nuances? And so we did that for a few years. And then in 2015, showed it to a few people, got some more perspective and insight on what they needed, and had some beta camps, I think in 2017, 2018. And then we're at Tri-State for our first conference in 2020 when the world stopped. So so I still do Canaret. We still are running camp. I'm still actively involved in the planning and preparation, and I'm actively involved there. But also off season, more involved with Camptivities, and then there to support for Camptivities during the summer as well.
Wow, I love your honesty about not being great your first year as a counselor.
My focus was not in the right place. And it's great because it helps me when we're talking to people or someone's struggling, going, I've been there, I've been you. And now you're at a fork in the road. You have to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I like hearing about this is what Howie always says is, what is it? The necessity of invention with starting Camptivities, how your scheduler quit on you and you had to come up with something. Howie, what's the quote you always use with us?
Oh my gosh.
I know. Now I put us all on the spot.
I know you did. I'm going to get it.
We're going to get it. We're going to get it.
We're going to
later.
get, but it is also, I think Ryan speaks to the classic, reality of a startup, right? You're trying to solve a problem in many ways, and I think that Ryan, the camp industry is no different, right? We're good as camp owners and camp people to identify problems, and then we pride ourselves on how to find a solution to that. And Ryan and I have spoken over several years now about the role of technology in solving, problems at camp, because while we're an industry that's very based on tradition, I think innovation has become sort of this new kind of reality. And there's so many examples. Camptivities is just one. But, if you've been at camp conferences across North America over the last several months, you're walking into exhibit halls with people who are, talking about all kinds of solutions to all kinds of things. Camptivities, addresses, a classic issue that all of us as camp people are solving is how do we take all these kids and move them around and make sure that we're getting kids what their parents signed up for on a consistent, regular basis, and that we're living up to the promises that we make to our clients. And I know, and I've talked to Ryan about this, the Excel spreadsheet, like the craziness of all that. But again, his group has solved for a really important problem that is consistent throughout the day camp and the overnight camp world, and it's great. So I think that's a great part of the origin story, that for many of us out there, we may be exploring issues within our own camp that we can maybe solve for the greater industry in some cases, and I think there are definitely examples out there of other people doing it. So this is great stuff.
Necessity
And
is
do
the
you think
mother
about
of invention. That's what
Necessi-
it is. That's
Necessity is the mother of invention. You got it.
And thinking about today's topic with turnover and training and all that, and I think we sometimes get so caught up in the way that we do things that we sometimes miss opportunities to improve how we can do them. And sometimes it's a matter of it's the last minute, we have to do it the way we always know how to do it. That totally makes sense. But I think it's one of those things that's hard. Change is hard, and so we get so reliant on certain people to do certain things that when you do have that turnover, that's one of the challenges, and not really the purpose of our chat today, but that's one of the reasons why we built Camptivities the way we did, is because usually it's a high-level person who's stuck in the office or losing sleep at night instead of being out in camp because they are the one who has the knowledge. And so how do we do a brain dump of that knowledge so someone else can carry that torch during the summer? So that was really baked in from the get-go of something that was important. And that's something, that as we're talking about onboarding of and training of leadership team, that's a piece, is get these really high-level people back out in camp doing what they can do really well, and stop with these kind of things that other systems can improve on by themselves.
Mm-hmm. So talk to us about that, Ryan. You just came back from Tri-State, and when we were talking to you about being on the podcast, you had said that you were hearing some chatter about the turnover of leadership and the onboarding. So tell us some of the things that you heard from individuals that were there.
Yeah, it was really remarkable to see how many camps over the last really 2 years or so. And I think some of it's from the pandemic and not operating or operating less, or maybe in a more stressful environment, that there's been just a lot of kind of the carousel of team members leaving and going to different camps, and maybe changing your staff, what it looks like, and just a lot of new people taking on roles in new places. And so they're bringing their culture with them from their experiences to a whole new place that it may not mesh well, or someone else is coming in who has no experience in that, or maybe they're being elevated from a different position. And it was remarkable to see how many camps had that. And for us at Camptivities, it's great because they're taking our software with them to a new place. So that's awesome. But it also means that there's just a lot of new faces at camps this year. And I feel like, historically speaking, at least, in my past experience, and I've been doing this since 2005 at the director level, that usually it's more constant, there's more consistency, and there's very little turnover for a lot of people. But that seemed to be an anomaly, a change this year, which was really interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think that, it's really pause for thought for us camp owners and senior leaders at our camps, because like a lot of things at camp, and I know we've talked about this, Kelly and Ryan, I know that you're no stranger to this, is we get sort of in that path of this is the way we do it, and we take a lot of things for granted around, we're just going to, it's this date in the calendar, and so is just going to start doing this part for preparation for the summer. And when you don't have those people, or you've been, as you suggested, in a phase for 2 years where out of necessity, as we've just mentioned, you've changed a system or you've reduced your numbers, either that person is doing something different or you're not doing it at the same scale. And now you have to give more intentional thought about how you're going to address that issue. And it could be from potentially training a brand new person. I would imagine many of us are out there thinking of new systems on how to bring a new person up to speed on the way you've done things, because maybe you've lost someone to another camp, or maybe because of the pandemic they've just moved on and camping is no longer part of their life. So I know that at Kinneret, are you living through yourself some of those examples, or personally over the last couple of years in any way, shape, or form?
A little bit. We had somebody who was with us for a number of years, and he actually found a position in another camp as a director, and so happy for him that he had that opportunity, because that was the next place for him to move. I wasn't going anywhere at Kinneret, so there really wasn't a spot for him to take on that role here. So I was very excited for him, and then the pandemic happened, and so we didn't really hire to replace him. And so last year was exceptionally challenging without having that person in that role in the same way that we have in past years. On top of all the other changes that we had to make in order to operate. But I'm looking at this year, we're expanding our leadership team, we're expanding our year-round team a little bit, knowing that I just am looking at how many people are feeling burnt out, and how many times I'm hearing from people that when someone leaves, now their responsibilities are on that other person's responsibilities are now on their shoulders. And so I'm looking at that from a cost perspective to them and their experience now, going, okay, how do I help them navigate this? And so that's a piece of kind of my future planning, is going, we need to have growing our team a little bit will take that pressure off of every individual as they're developing their skills and getting more comfortable, rather than expecting a new person to be able to take on what a multi-year person previously was handling.
So just for a little context for people listening, How many leadership team members do you have, Ryan? I think it'd be interesting to hear from Howie and I as well, but how many leadership team members do you have and how do you classify that? Like, what are the titles that are under that leadership
Great.
team umbrella?
Great. We're differently structured, I know, than Howie, because him and I have had this conversation before in this regard. So we have typically our leadership team, our year-round team is typically 3 year-round people, and then we have a part-time. We have 2 part-time folks who help us with different things, from staffing and enrollment and things like that. We have an enrollment coordinator and then someone who oversees staffing. This year we have 2 full-time and we have 4 part-time people who are doing that, and one person is going to graduating this year, is going to stay on with us after the summer to make that so we're up to 3 full-time plus 4 part-time moving forward for the foreseeable future. During the summer, we have roughly 350 kids a day, so we're on the smaller side compared to a lot of East Coast camps, and kind of middle size, I think, for most West Coast camps. And we have, during the summer, we typically have a team of about 8 leadership team members as well. Jamie is my co-director, and then we have the rest of the team virtually supports groups and parents and specialists during the summer. So we don't have levels of our leadership team. This year, we're going to have somebody who is actually going to be there to support the leadership team. So they're not going to be supporting any groups. They're just there to support the leadership team because we'll have so many new leadership team members to help them be successful. And then we've added an additional person at that level to support groups. So each of them can support a few less groups or specialists this summer as well. So we'll be at 10 or maybe 11 this year.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So.
What about you, Howie?
Yeah. So our day camp has 4 full-time people. And our definition of leadership team is that core group of, I would say, anywhere from 12 to 15 people who I would say year round contribute to the planning and execution of all the things that need to happen over the course of what we call a 12-month cycle of camp. All those people have typically other jobs, teaching, etc., but are committed to sort of one meeting a month kind of thing and are in the loop. So that's our definition of leadership team: 4 full-time, and then add another 10 people throughout the year. Once we get into the summer, we created a brand new layer of leadership this year because we recognized that we wanted to bring on younger leaders into what we call our senior staff. People who would otherwise look, I think, a trend to other things because they were getting into first or second year university or college. And sometimes we would typically hire older division heads or unit heads at that point, but we really wanted to capture some of those people younger to give them an incentive to take on more leadership. So we created a new layer of our most experienced senior staff to be the supervisors of a younger crop of unit heads, which we feel for 2022, which we're currently going through an onboarding process of defining responsibilities and stuff like that, that we think can serve us very well to free up some of my leadership team members, those people who meet throughout the year, to be more global problem solvers and supporters and help with the reality of coming back to work out of the pandemic, mental health of young staff and campers and stuff like that. So, supreme problem solvers and support, support network for camp. So that's some of the changes we've had. So I would say, while we're not, we are a Northeast day camp. We have about 700 kids a day here at our program. And so we have in the summer, the classic definition of leadership team, unit heads, division heads, everything. We have close to 50 people who have various responsibilities for delivering program, camper care, support, customer service, etc. So that's our structure.
Okay, interesting.
And you,
for us,
yeah.
We're similar in size to Ryan. So we have about 350 kids a day. And we have myself, and then we have 3 summer directors, 2 assistant directors, one who is year round. So our year round assistant director helps me year round. And then we have a camp specialist who's like that first tier of returning staff that supports the staff directly during the day with what they need. But yeah, so we're around 7. So that's always interesting to see what people have in their numbers. So what does that look like for the two of you, especially, for you, Ryan, we'll start with you with onboarding those new team members. Is that going to look differently for you this year? Is it going to look how it has in the past? Do you feel like you have a good system, or is that something you're navigating and is a new thing you'll be doing this spring?
So we last year we didn't get to do our typical onboarding of new leadership members because of COVID and the restrictions that were currently in place. And so we actually got to see you had the concept of the sliding door of like what happens if one thing changed, right? If you went through the door or don't go through the door. And so last year we got to see kind of not doing what we had started doing, the impact of that. And we really saw a lot of value in what we had been previously doing. So we're going back to it. And back in 2005, I want to say, we started doing a retreat, which literally the first time just started as a camping trip amongst myself and the other leadership team members, because I was new to the camp and they were new to me because I'd been gone and wanted to get to know them. And after the trip, we all felt so much closer and we worked so much more effectively together. They were like, there's something here. And so we started expanding on that. So what we've typically done is we go up to just a beach house or a house that's up the road, 30, 40 minutes away from where we are. So we're removed enough to be isolated, but also not too far. And we do, the first night is really just us getting to know each other, because we found that as people get elevated into this position, oftentimes the people who you're on leadership team with used to supervise you. And so you need time to get to know them on an equal playing field. And so the first night is playing games and activities where we get to have those shared experiences together and getting to know each other and kind of talking about those kind of things. And the second day and then we all sleep over, and we try not to have it be too cushy. Honestly, we want it to be a little campy. And even though we're indoors and we have running water and bathrooms and sinks and all the luxuries that we've come accustomed to, we want it to be, so we typically use some air mattresses and really want it to be a little more campy style, and seeing each other not at our best, not at our we've taken time to make ourselves up in the morning. And the next day, Saturday, we go on a walk at one point to grab some coffee. We cook breakfast in the house. Everyone's pitching in, but just having downtime to socialize with each other and to talk about whatever's going on in the world, as well as what's going on in our lives, and sharing those kind of things. It's opportunities for that in camp we just don't have, that because we're so focused on the kids, we don't get that. So that's something that we found really valuable. And then really diving into the nuances of what's your perspective on what it means to be a part of leadership team? What do you think your role is on leadership team? What is it about? And it's really interesting to see where people come in from. So that's kind of where we start. The weekend is on that Saturday morning, is really talking through that. What's their perspective of what this role is? And then we get into we set some ground rules for the day. We talk about supervising. We do tend to have our new leadership team members read Michael Brandwine's book, Super Staff Supervision, as a starting point for that. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. And then we talk about what it means to be a supervisor at camp. And we don't think of ourselves really as supervisors, but as really support for our staff. And so that's kind of, the morning of that day is really talking through that stuff. And I can keep going to talk about the rest of the weekend, but I really want to hear from you two too, to hear how you guys onboard and bring up new staff too, new leadership team members.
Well, my quick answer is ditto, and I will address that in a second, Ryan, because between you and Kelly, I feel like we're like camp cousins, just divided geographically by a little bit of distance and some air travel. But first of all, Kelly, I don't think anyone on the show in almost 3 years has used the term beach house in our show. So I just want to say we are talking to someone from LA, which is amazing. I just want to throw that out there. But I digress. Is this mic on? No. But thank you. Yes, of course. But Ryan, so much of what you said resonates with me, and I have to give, in many ways, credit to my wife's dad, Larry Bell, the founder essentially of Robinhood, because back in the 80s, this idea of a retreat of leadership staff was something that has been a part of our culture for a very long time, And we often will, and I'm sure lots of camps do this, but we go to like a local conservation area, which is about an hour outside of where most people live. And we sleep in dormitories and bunk beds, and we get out of our comfort zone, and we're definitely schleppy all weekend long. But our leadership team, that team of 14, create a 2-night, 2.5, 3-day program of sharing and fun and team building and some adult fun, and with just some pizza and maybe some beverages and one of the evenings to let loose. But it's work, and we're talking about we use a phrase called the State of the Union kind of thing, to use a U.S. phrase, but the idea that Sari and I will kick off the weekend with just sharing what the year of the off season has looked like, sounded like. What are parents wanting? What are their fears? How is this team going to live up to the promises that we've made to all of our families who've signed up? And then we do address supervision. We do address things. And I'm so glad to say, I actually, Ryan, for the last 15 years, have been giving Michael Brandwine Super Staff Supervision as the onboarding gift to all supervisors at camp, which has been sort of so big plug to Michael. But it is, I think, in many ways, one of the quintessential supervision books for any new camp leader. But yeah, so much of what you said, not at the risk of repeating it, but so much of what your goals have been what we've have tried to strive for over the course of a weekend. And we typically do it about anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks out of the first day of the summer, to give everyone some context of when do you do this. We find that given we're dealing with a lot of college, university aged leaders at camp who take on these roles, they're typically, at least up here in Toronto, are not free until the first weekend of May. So we do the first weekend of May, and we do a retreat. It's a mandatory piece of coming on board in the role. And then we have the subsequent weeks to fine tune, answer questions, follow through on assignments to get ready for the summer, because not all of those people are full-time at that point in our staff setting. They're still doing other things. They may be doing a third, semester of school or whatever, but they know camp has to be on their radar before we all join each other at staff orientation and pre-camp mid-June, because we're a camp that doesn't start till the first week of July, where I know it's different for you guys who typically would start, sometime in early June or mid-June kind of thing. So there you go. That's sort of the onboarding sort of philosophy of what we do. Kelly?
So is that like 15 of you then, Howie? Is that how many you bring up to that, or how many do you bring up to that retreat?
That whole close to 50 people.
Okay.
It'll be the whole group. We'll bring 50 people for a weekend, and we will, this is the team that makes it all work. We have close to 300 staff. So this 50 group, puts a lot of work into support. That's 300 including the 50. So an additional 250 that we need to support and, make sure that we're doing everything we can to set them up for success.
Just a really curious question for you, Howie. Have you seen that it's harder to get everyone to be available that weekend? And if someone isn't available for that retreat, can they not be a part of leadership team for you?
Yeah, it's pretty much a deal breaker for me. I've tried to stand very close to that. But my budget is different than other budgets, but I have some people who are on the West Coast. I'll fly them in for the weekend. We're ready. This is so important to us. And if someone is going on birthright or backpacking in Europe or going to Asia or doing something else, I just tell them, you can go after the weekend, but you got to be here for the weekend. And it's been pretty good, from that perspective too. And in my case, I do make it mandatory to stay over, because as you suggested, Ryan, the meaning of the weekend is this living environment together, like being with each other 24/7. If you were there from 8 a.m. till 10 at night and slept in your own, that doesn't work for us. You got to do the whole thing. And that's what I think allows people to walk out of the weekend saying, I know what I signed up for now. This is what I'm part of. That's really the big part of that.
We are the same way, and I feel like it's so important. And I ask that question because if you don't do this, like that's really an important piece that everybody is there. And I'm going to say all that, and I'm going to put an asterisk to say that this year we have one of our leadership members is expecting a baby 2 weeks before, and
There
so
you go.
I said, okay, if you drive up on the Saturday to be there for the Saturday piece, we'll accommodate that this year because of the baby, but be there as much as you can. And so that's the asterisk to the requirement of being there. But it's someone who's worked at camp for many years already, and we do have a better relationship with already as well. But the weekend is really important. Everyone's got to be there, and we're flying people in too. We're flying in 3 people for it.
Yeah, and I would just add that for those of us, I'm talking from my day camp perspective, but I also am co-owner of an overnight camp, and we do the same thing for our overnight camp leadership, seniors, head staff. We don't do it at the overnight camp. We actually feel there's value in doing it in a different venue, that just because there's so much familiarity with going back to camp that we don't want to do it at camp. Now, people can choose we have found value in doing it elsewhere. Some of it could be geography. I think if my overnight camp was closer, maybe we would, but I'd like to think that the fact that we're all going to a relatively unfamiliar place is part of the process of bonding and coming together, and enhances the whole experience of living this weekend together before we actually get in the setting where we're all going to make the magic happen, or whatever we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And if we didn't have a camp family who was gracious enough to let us use their beach house, we would not be staying at a beach house either. So if you're looking for a place to do it, oftentimes some of your families, I think, may have something that you could use. It doesn't need to have a room for everyone and a bed for everyone. And so making it work with whatever you've got that's really what started this, and I think is why it's so beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, while Ryan's getting a bougie beach house, I'm worried about the plumbing being frozen at the Shuna family cabin that we'll be using. But welcome to Minnesota. But I know for our California listeners who also time and being paid time is a very important thing in California, especially. Are we all nodding our heads to we're paying our staff to be there, or they're just volunteering to be there for the weekend? So how do you handle it? Because I know people will want to know those things. Is this you're paying their time, certain time that's working, they're not being paid at all? Like, how does that work for the two of you?
So we have it built into their season contract, as it's one of the items listed, and they're going to be paid this amount for the course of the summer, and that's included in there. And we also include our SILT orientation, which are high schoolers, as well as our staff orientation and some other things as well. So that's included in it.
Okay. How would you do the same thing?
Exactly the same.
Yep. Okay.
I feel like Howie and I could switch places at the different camp in some of our conversations, and like within 30 minutes we'd be going. Like there's so many similarities. It's really remarkable.
Yes,
we've never had this conversation before. So
we've never. Yeah.
Maybe like Parent Trap. Like we could just swap you and then see what happens. I don't know.
It's the camp. Cool. It's the camp owner exchange program.
There you go.
I like it.
I'd have to work on my Canadian accent, but I think I could do it.
Yes, you just say A. How's it going, A?
I like it. We could work on that. That'll be a new podcast, maybe a vlog. We could start a new TikTok vlog channel. And for us to answer we have never done a retreat before, but I'm doing one for the first time next weekend. So because we've reorged and are adding to our leadership team, and our 38-year veteran staff, she retired last summer. So it's a year of a lot of change for us. We're doing it for the first time. So I'm really excited. So I'm excited also just to talk to the two of you about what you do and your details, but it felt really important with having a new team and getting to know each other, even though the people moving up to leadership team have been at camp for a long time. I'm really excited because I think all the things that you're speaking of, it will serve us well this summer as a team. So it's interesting to see how everyone does it. And we're doing the same thing, 2 nights at a cabin, and team building and food and cooking and walking, but also just really also, besides the mission and the why and some of that supervision stuff, really just trying to hammer out some planning stuff as well, and staff training goals, and while we're all together. So I'm really looking forward to it, but that's how we're going to do ours.
And so over the years, we've kind of fluctuated. So we used to just do like a couple like afternoon meetings that we would do in person to get ready before we went to the retreat model. And last year, that's what we went back to. And our leadership team was very successful last year, but we also saw that there was a lot of things like, oh, right, we didn't get to that, or, oh, yes, we didn't get to that, or the comfort level in asking for help wasn't there yet. So that's one of the things that I think is you can't really, you can't create, it just takes time. And so that's what this retreat kind of speeds that up a lot faster and gets you there, getting comfortable with each other much more quickly than you typically would. And this year, we're actually going to try something new that we haven't tried before. And Kelly, this may work for your group this year as well, especially since you have new people coming on. Is we're going to ask our staff, our leadership team members, new ones, everyone, to come up with these two questions, answer these two questions before they arrive, which is, what does your success as a leadership team member look like? And what does your failure as a leadership team member look like? And for a new leadership team member, they may have been looking at this for a while, and in their mind, we're curious to see where they're coming from. What's their frame of reference of what that success or failure looks like? And I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know what people's answers are going to be, but we're going to try that question this year as a frame that we want them to be thinking through, a lens to be thinking through as they come up for the weekend.
I think that's great. And and I think there's real value into some of the pre-arrival retreat considerations, right? It could be in the form of the questions that Ryan just shared with us. It could be in the form of even a personal connection with that person's direct supervisor, depending on your structure. Like there's all kinds, we have to all, not unlike the camper who comes to you for the first time on day one of camp, the new leadership team member is coming into a setting at a retreat 5, 6, 8 weeks out of the start of camp, feeling some of the same butterflies and anxiety about, Ryan, Howie, or Kelly hired me. I feel they have confidence in me, but man, I've looked up to that person for the last 5 years, or I'm brand new and so doing whatever you can to ease those butterflies, the welcoming process, and just thinking of your new people that you're onboarding in environments like we're describing, like think of them like campers. What would you do to make them feel comfortable? Whether it's as simple as a name tag or a pre-arrival activity, or as they sign in on the weekend, we've tried to be creative with all kinds of things that just take down the anxiety wherever we can, because there is a danger. And again, if anyone listening is experiencing large turnover, versus someone who has maybe only a few people, you've got to be careful about assumptions and language and assuming that people understand what you're talking about when you're talking about high-level organizational supervisory stuff at your camp. So you've got to give a lot of thought before the weekend to the organization intentionality of those things. And I know we've had our, some pitfalls along the way where we didn't give enough attention to the 2 or 3 people, of the 35, and they were looking there with like, deer in the headlights, like what is that person really talking about? And really, I got it, so I think just some consideration for that for sure. I don't know, Ryan, if you can relate to that, like, because we talk about that all the time here, because we don't want that person just in the first hour of that weekend going, holy moly, if you know what I'm saying.
100%. And I've tried to, what I ultimately say when someone has an interest in leadership and we're talking about it, is we talk about it in the context that it really should be something that they're thinking about as a 2-year position. And not that they're committing to a second year, but that the first year can be so difficult that if you think you only have 1 summer left at camp, don't be on leadership team. It is so hard and so challenging that you need time under your belt. Think about your first year as a counselor, how hard that was, and what you learned and how much you grew. That second year, you can implement so many things. You know what you're expecting, and so there are times where someone's like, maybe it isn't the right fit for me because of that. And so it's a frame of reference too of just it is challenging. Doesn't mean we're not going to support you. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get through it and be successful and look back and go, wow, that was awesome. But it is hard. And if you only have 1 summer, go do something fun for your last summer at camp. Don't take this on.
Some good wisdom. I like that. And it's so interesting to hear, like I like how you're talking about the what's worked, what hasn't. Like I think that lesson learned, and Ryan, how you said you kind of went away from it, but now you're going back to it. I think those are really great things to pass along. You also talked about tools. So you talked about Michael Brandwine's book. Ryan, you talked about some questions. Are there any other like tools or resources that you use, or for anyone listening to this who maybe doesn't do a retreat and is thinking about it, activities you like always have to do or like super important, or any other things that you feel like you would pass along as some wisdom to other people either already doing this or thinking about doing it?
So an early game that we like to play on that Friday night, the first one, is a game called Telestrations, which is fascinating. If you haven't played it, it's literally you sit in a circle, you each get a card, it has a word on it. You then draw that, you flip the page that has the word on it, and the next person, you hand to the next person, now they have to write out the word that they think your picture depicts, and then it goes around the circle that way. So when it comes back to you, see the evolution of whatever that was. But the dialogue and the understanding of how differently we communicate and where our strengths are, and you get so many good laughs out of it, and it ends up being something that's it's a really good icebreaker opening game to play if you're looking for something that's a good one. I mentioned very briefly the ebb and flow of it, and so if you have a heavy returning leadership team in a year, we do a different retreat than when it's a lot of new people. And so when it's a lot of new people but a couple of returners, we enlist some of the returners to play a role with leading some of the sessions as well, about lessons learned and what their experience was as well. So we try to balance those two things. That's important too. So if you feel like you just have all returners, the retreat's not important, I would argue it may be even more important, because you can push the team even farther by having that time together to reset and refocus as well. So I wouldn't get lost in that.
Absolutely. And I would add that, the same people delivering the same sessions or speaking, like, mix it up as much as you can, especially from, your core people who have become known as sort of the expert in your setting on this particular topic, etc. They apply a lot more credibility when it can be, the person they see in this light during the summer, and they can speak to it from a more global point of view. We use a lot of language in our retreat about what does it look like at our camp, So you can give out the amazing Michael Brandwine book, and you can use Bob Ditter, and you can use all these wonderful people and their resources, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we try to bring it to, so what does that look like in our setting? Can we use examples of what we've seen or experienced, or what you may be in for? And I think that whenever you're dealing with this type of training with a segment of your leadership, you want to prep them or train them from the perspective of, what does it look like in my daily life? Because if you're spending too much time at 30,000 feet philosophically about leadership and all the wonderful things that I think we talk about, you gotta bring it down to, what does it look like in my daily life in this role? Because when Kelly comes to work at Camp Robin Hood, I think one of the questions she's asking herself, but when the kid does this, or my staff makes this choice, what do you want me to do? Right? And so we can talk about support and empathy and compassion and all this wonderful stuff, which is so vital, but how does that translate into our setting? And what does, for example, in your setting, in my setting, there's a certain expectation of how we deal with behavior management. And, do we give timeouts? Do we use language to say, if you keep doing this, you're not going to participate in the next activity? Do we use that brand of behavior management and those options within our own setting? I think as leaders, we need to know where we all stand so we can be consistent. So I would encourage you to get sort of in the weeds of daily life as much as you can. There is a place for talking philosophically and what we're all about, but our group has found success in, what does it look like on the ground kind of stuff.
We do a ton of role plays with our leadership team at the retreat, and things like a parent phone call What's that like to make that phone call? And we even model how to ask for help of another leadership team member. And then we'll also go over sitting down with a staff person and having a CEDOS conversation with them. And what does that look like? And CEDOS is a Michael Brandwein acronym as well. But we'll role play that and then pause and say, tell me what's your end goal? What are you trying to achieve? How are the questions you're asking going to get you there? Because that's something that they can sit down and have a conversation with a staff person without any intentionality, and then they end and they go, okay, great, I did that, and the person's going, well, that was a waste of my time. Why did I just sit down with that leadership team member? So there's that piece, and the other is, how do you put yourself in the staff person's mindset of like how they need to be supported? It's not how you need to be supported, but how they need to be supported. And that's, I think, the thing that most young leadership team members struggle with, is understanding that how you need to be supported is often very, very different than what the person you're supporting needs. And so how do you figure that out? And so that's another piece of our retreat that we go through, and we really kind of talk through some ways to do that. And there's no one answer to that, but it's through questions and dialogue that you get there. But that's a really important frame of mind of going, okay, I need to support this person this way and that person that way, and it's going to change how I talk to them. And you probably already do it with your team. But you don't necessarily realize that you're doing it, or how do you teach that? And so that's something that we do cover in our retreat as well. And I think it's a really important step for a young leadership team person.
And I think that one of the healthiest messages of any retreat weeks before camp is just sending a very healthy message that this weekend is not going to supply all the answers. Like it's just not going to do it. It's just going to be tip of the iceberg in establishing trust, establishing relationships where questions can be comfortably asked, and there will be answers that will support you on this journey of learning how to be a supervisor. So I think that the weekend, the retreat, whatever it looks like for whatever camp you operate, should be at its foundation sort of this opportunity to get everyone on the same page, that we're all in this together. There's going to be tons of questions, and we just got to know who our go-to people are and feel comfortable in going to those people when we find this. Because, the 2 nights are not going to cover everything we know that. It's not going to come even close to covering what it is we're going to face together on a daily basis, or what you're going to face in the course of your work. But if you can walk away feeling, I now feel comfortable with this person. I've seen them in action for the last 3 years. I'm now working alongside them. They're not as intimidating as I thought it might be, or I know that they're not going to be upset if I ask a question. Like in many ways, it's mission accomplished if you can have everybody walking away feeling that way. And that's sort of, what drives sort of the motivation for creating that weekend for us.
Mm-hmm. The one pitfall I'll say, kind of flipping a little bit, is Kelly, you kind of mentioned this, is getting too focused on the nuts and bolts of the day and those tangible things, and focusing too much on that. And you're just going through this, okay, who's going to do this job? Who's going to do that job? And all of a sudden half your day is gone, when that's not really as important as getting some of these fundamental frame of reference things tackled, and getting to know each other. And so really focusing on the, not necessarily 30,000 foot view, but like, how do I have that conversation with a parent? And when they get frustrated, what do I do? How do I respond to that? I may never have had to talk to a parent that way before. And if I give concrete reasons why I'm making this call to a parent versus like, so my assumption is blah, 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 well, that's going to change the conversation with the parent right there. So role playing that allows you to process that. And we've gone through that as owners and directors, probably thousands of times at this point. But for a first year leadership team person, that's terrifying. They're sweating, they're stressing out about making this call. So the more you can role play it, it helps ease that tension a little bit, but still it's going to be a little scary when the time comes.
Mm-hmm. Well, something I think that we'll have to, and you brought this up a little bit, Ryan, but we'll be focusing on with our newest leadership team members, is that shift from coworker to supervisor. And the way you respond to a fellow counselor venting is very different than how I want you. I mean, I hope you respond maybe like a leadership team member, but the expectation will be different of how you respond to that venting or frustrations from a staff member, or things that are going wrong, of the questions, how, just getting more information versus how you might respond if you're their coworker. So I think that's going to be a big one for us, is that supervisory, that first level of understanding your role and the perspective shift as a leadership team member. So, but that's interesting, Ryan, too. Yeah. To not get into the nitty gritty as much as the team building, bonding, mission focus, getting everybody on the same page, like you said, Howie.
Yeah, and I think that, for lack of a better description, there has to be an exercise of everyone understanding what team they're playing on within the team, right? Kind of thing, if you know what I'm saying. Like if they're now supervising friends of theirs, coworkers, and now there's a greater expectation of them not letting that behavior slide, and they need to understand that they're on the team that identifies and addresses those issues now. Like, and they need to understand it, or they have to understand that when a policy needs some reinforcement within the camp setting, that they're now, depending on their role, it's expected that they're going to be part of the group that follows through on that. And they may have some personal feelings about that, and perhaps there's a forum for talking about that. But it's almost like when we leave the room, this is our team kind of thing. And sometimes the weekend, what you described, Kelly, can just talk about, some of those things that they're going to need to understand, transitioning into this new leadership role within the team.
And we sometimes even encourage them to have a conversation with those friends first, before the day starts, and help them understand, like, hey, we're still friends. And outside of camp, we can talk and do all this, but when we're in camp, like, I have this role and responsibility, and we found more success having that conversation before something happens rather than waiting until after it happens, especially with our leadership team members moving up.
And you can give them conversation starters for all of that too. I think that's part of it. Just as we give conversation starters for parent conversations, we can give those new leaders within our leadership teams, or new people to our environment, the kind of conversation starters that could hopefully get that conversation to a better place. I think it's an extension of that.
Yeah.
This conversation really brings up for me too, thinking about our leaders in training program we have now is 2 counselors, really seasoned counselors. And then typically they're the ones who will move up to our leadership team. And this conversation makes me think about, like, maybe we just pull them into the leadership team earlier. Like, that role is always leadership team people, and there may be an entry level point because they've kind of stepped away from being in the thick of the counselor role to leading this special program. So that's been a good takeaway for me of, like, well, maybe they just become leadership team members. It's an entry level, but they're a part of that, because this retreat, I think, would be helpful for them, because they almost step into a higher level of counselor, but we don't call it anything different. So that's super helpful. We could just chat forever, couldn't we? This is always hard. It's always like, okay, fine, we have to stop. But cousins from across the country, we're going to need to get down to business a little bit and thank our second sponsor. How lucky are we? The best podcast ever to have 2 sponsors. Our second one is Camp Brain. So we want to give a big shout out to them. They've been in the camp industry with software since 1994. When I was still in high school. And they have 45 plus dedicated staff, probably around my age as well, that can meet your every need. Camp Brain has a sophisticated custom reporting system that can help turn your data, we all thrive on the data, into valuable insights. So make that data work for you. If you are interested in Camp Brain, maybe right now you've been struggling with your registration or enrollment and you want to make a switch, give them a call. You can call them at 866-485-8885 or campbrain.com. Now that we've finished some business, let's end with our inspiration.
Absolutely. So, as everyone knows, at the end of every show, we share something that might be inspiring us. Today it could be a book, an article, a podcast, maybe something a documentary you saw, a leadership quote, anything that will have us thinking and perhaps help us become a better camp professional. So, I thought maybe we would start. Kelly, what's on your mind these days? What do you have as far as inspiration?
All right, I am ready to roll here. So my inspiration that I have is from the weekend. I got a text from a former staff member. He is now working at General Mills, which is a big company in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. They make Cheerios. If anyone doesn't know who General Mills is. But he had texted me and he sent me a photo from their keynote for their annual retreat. And it was a picture of Glennon Doyle on Microsoft Teams. And he said, recognize this keynote speaker General Mills brought in for our development. I'm getting some repeat lessons from HPR staff training. Good thing I already knew I can do hard things. So that just for me was so validating about the work we do and this conversation of onboarding and the leadership lessons that we provide. I just absolutely feel filled up to the top of my bucket to know that the things that he's learning now aren't new to him, that they're just being reaffirmed in this huge company, this Fortune 500 company. So that just for me, I sent that on to my leadership team and said, we're doing good work here. So that was my inspiration this week, Howie.
That's amazing, Kelly. Those are the best feelings for sure. Amazing, amazing. Ryan, what do you have as our guest to have some inspiration?
So mine is really thinking a conversation I just had with a longtime staff person who came into camp and was actually in tears because they really thought that their time in camp was over because they didn't know where else to go and they didn't know what else to do and they didn't feel like there was anywhere else for them to grow into. And they just were talking about all the things that they've grown in camp and how they've grown as a person and a better human, and how much they attribute the version of who they are today to their experiences at camp, and that they weren't just they were sad that their time at camp was over, but so appreciative of everything that we provided. And through that conversation, it was like, well, why does your time at camp have to be over? These are the people we want to keep in camp. And so we ended up kind of moving some things around and creating this other position for them that really still hits on some really important stuff for us, and will really help them be really effective and a big part of camp, but also gave them a place to grow into at camp and to continue their journey at camp and to not end it. And so just a reminder of how much we really do change people and give people an opportunity to grow and develop skills. And even the hard moments that we all have, and the last 2 years have been really hard for a lot of people. It's nice to know that we're really making an impact and it's still really valuable. So it was a good reminder for me, and I was glad we were able to find a way for them to continue in camp, despite them thinking sadly that their time at camp had come to an end because they didn't see another position for them to go to.
Yeah, and I think that's also a great example of, as camp people, we at our heart try to think out of the box. We try to some of our most successful moments as leaders is when we can not be rigid and provide opportunities in silos, that we can do these things, and the benefits of those things are just so incredible, not only for camp, for the people that you're providing it for. So I love that example too. That's amazing. For me, it's an article. It's from Harvard Business Review. It's called Connect with Empathy, but Lead with Compassion. I never lose a moment to get Kelly to feel a little verklempt, Brene Brown style or something like that. So I always throw those in there. But this is a really good article, and the link is in the show notes. I encourage everyone to look at it. And I think that given the topic that we're dealing with, I'm already thinking that this article may be some pre-arrival reading for my group before they come to the weekend, because these are the themes and things we're trying to hit on as leaders. I often talk about, you are a boss at camp, but you don't have to be bossy, right? So there's a difference between being a boss and being bossy. So we use that kind of language around. I thought this article really addresses some really in the moment, what a lot of people are talking and reading about. So check it out. Connect with empathy, but lead with compassion. Some great inspiration all around, Kelly.
Awesome. How I'm looking forward to getting a little verklempt reading that article soon. Thank you. Ryan, if people, as we exit today's episode, if people want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to reach you?
You can always email me at ryan@campcanaret.com or ryan@camptivities.com, either one.
Perfect. Howie, how about you?
Yeah, reach me at howie@camprobinhood.ca. Happy to hear from anybody who wants to reach out.
All right. And my email is Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com. Well, the two of you, this was so great. Thank you so much, Ryan, for being a guest on our show today. I thought there were so many helpful tidbits for those that are onboarding some new leadership team members. If you, as our guest, if you found some great things in the show that you'd like to check on resources, you can find the show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. We appreciate you listening. We hope you loved the best podcast ever, and we'll see you at our next episode.